Live now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the this virtual meeting of the Children and Young People's Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel. Can I remind all participants that normal rules of procedures apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the chair. As we're meeting virtually, proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. Whilst members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively participate or comment on proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? Thank you very much. So we'll go to the agenda. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence.
Not received any, Chair.
Thanks, Joe. Declarations of interest. Easy for me to say. Do we have any? No, we don't. Take that as a note. No answer. Excellent. Agenda item number 3. The minutes of the last meeting. Can we accept the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of December 2020 as a correct record? Councillor Udin.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much, guys. Brilliant. So, can I just say before we go on, the next 2 agenda items are in relation to our current scrutiny topic of sufficiency and permanency. We have a presentation in relation to foster carers and the corporate parenting strategy. Some members might be familiar with the presentations as they recently went to corporate parenting board in December. However, as chair of this scrutiny panel, I feel it's beneficial for all panel members to consider the information in a scrutiny context, as this is relevant to our current topic and gives the panel the opportunity to scrutinise the information and ask questions. I believe Jenny Rowan's given the presentation.
Yes,
before we start, can I just ask Jen, is it okay if we ask questions after every slide? The reason why I'm saying this is because after attending many meetings online, I feel like when we have meetings in the Mandela room or the other room, we seem to have more of a flow going when members feel free to ask questions when they come into the heads, and I feel like if we can get more of a flow and more questions going, then we're going to get more out of the meeting. So is it okay for members to ask questions after every slide? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Thank you very much. So
can I just introduce Jenny, Chair? Is that okay? Or
yeah, I was going to ask Jenny to do that herself. Just
oh, sorry, no, I will stop. Can I just say though, I'm really appreciative of you introducing the agenda items in the way that you have. I think we have a different emphasis, and I think particularly asking the questions after each slide will be really, really helpful. So thank you. And Jenny's our esteemed team manager for the fostering service, but can tell you more about herself and all the positives that go with it.
Thank you very much. So Jenny, over to you.
Okay, so I think I've been introduced already. So I'm Jenny Rowan. I'm the team manager within the fostering service, and having commenced in role in March of last year. The service as a whole, we're making quite significant progress, and there's a lot to celebrate in terms of good things that are happening, plans moving forward, but there's still lots to do as well. So it's an exciting time within the fostering service. So if I'll launch into the presentation, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So Joe, are you going to bring that up? That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So if we go through to the 3rd page, please. That's brilliant. Okay. So currently, as it stands, we present all of our information in quarter data, which then all informs the annual data set that we have to provide to government in regards to how, as a service, we are performing. So the number of carers and places. So we currently, as of quarter 2, in the financial year of 2020 to 2021, we have 156 foster carer households. That equates to 263 placements available for our children and young people within our internal mainstream and connected carers provision. As you'll see from the annual return from 2019 to 2020, that is a net increase of both of foster carers. It isn't of fostering placements, but arguably it's about us utilising our foster carers and placement availability as effectively as we can. Example will be where we have foster carers that are approved for, say, 2 children or young people, but approved for 2 with 3 of siblings. So we are trying as best as we possibly can to optimise that. And place children and match them in the most appropriate foster placements possible. Has anyone got any questions?
If you do, guys, with the information being on the screen, please just shout out. No questions. Excellent. Can we move on?
Okay. If we move on to the next page, please. So we have an array of foster carers, fostering households within the service. Our mainstream, so our unrelated carers, they have approvals for long-term fostering, short-term fostering, fostering to adopt, and respite. As part of our permanency and trying to secure permanency for our children and young people, we are trying to develop and evolve our short-term foster placements and look at what resources are required to support those placements converting into long-term placements where it's appropriate for children. In Q2 of 2020 to 21, we had 17 children in long-term foster place. 17 long-term placements, 89 short-term, 38 fully approved connected persons, 1 foster to adopt, and 11 households for respite. Has anyone got any questions on that? Okay. In terms of carer, I think we've missed this. There we go. In terms of number of carers approved, in 2019 to 2020, we had 22 mainstream carers, so unrelated carers, approved. And in the last financial year, we had 19 fully approved connected or related persons. As of Q2 in this financial year, we have 5 households approved for mainstream fostering and 7 approved for fully approved connected persons. That is a lower amount in terms of our connected carers in particular. But actually that is a success story, because what that tells us is that our children are achieving permanence in a more timely manner. So from the point of temporary approval and placement of children and young people with connected related carers, we have 16 weeks initially, and we go for an 8-week extension thereafter during the course of assessment if required. But what we are seeing is that prior to us getting to family placement panel, so within 16 weeks and definitely within 24 weeks, we're seeing our children and young people achieving permanence, which is a really good thing, as I'm sure you'll all identify as well. If we go on to the next page, please, if anyone's got any questions. No? Okay. So there has been some worries raised across the service in respect to number of foster carers approved, and with change comes a level of anxiety and uncertainty. However, in terms of our data, our information, what we are seeing is some of those anxieties aren't actually based upon any evidence. I say that as over 2019 to 2020, there were 16 mainstream fostering households deregistered and 8 fully approved connected persons. So as of Q2 in 2020 to 2021, we've had no fostering households deregister or resign, but we have had 2 connected persons. Again, the reason for the deregistrations of the connected persons is that children are securing permanency via the granting of legal orders with those connected carers or reunification to their birth parents.
Jen? So when we look at the 2019-2020 figure of 16, what you're saying is that of those 16, there's no specific evidence of why. It's all different reasons.
Yeah, so there'll be a
There's no pattern.
variety. So from 2019 through to 2020, there's a variety of different reasons. So you have people that have naturally retired. You've got people that have secured full-time employment and no longer wish to foster. We have some that have just decided fostering isn't for them and so have chosen a different career. There's some that will have retired for health reasons as well. So there's a whole array of those. Some of the worries have been in respect to whether foster carers from Middlesbrough are moving over to IFAs, our independent fostering agencies. And since my commencement of employment in March of last year, there's been one fostering household that has moved from our service through to an independent fostering agency. What we have had though is approximately 3, maybe 4 fostering households that have come to us from independent fostering agencies through to Middlesbrough. So there's a net increase. So we are doing really well in regard to our conversion rate and in trying to encourage particularly where our children are placed with foster carers on a long-term basis, that's their forever foster placement, that those foster carers do come over to Middlesbrough, and a number of them are citing that's because of the improvements in practice, that they feel they're kept well informed and that they're really embraced as a part of the multi-agency team.
Excellent. It's good to know that we are looking out for any negative, any negative patterns, and making sure that we don't repeat, the reasons why. So that's always a good thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we can move on to the next one, please. So in terms of the number of children that we've had placed within our in-house provisions, fostering placements, both mainstream and connected, you'll see in 2019 to 2020, there was 163 children. And of Q2 in 2020 to 2021, there's 174. So that's it. We're getting better at utilising our internal foster placements and making sure as far as practicable that we are matching, well, we are always matching our children appropriately, but also making sure that they're in-house, because whilst I am a little bit biased, our fostering service is something that we believe that we're providing a really good service for our children. In terms of number of vacant places, we are at 15 as of Q2 in 2020 to 2021, which is the annual average for 2019 to 2020. The number of not available places, so this will be for an array of reasons, so foster carers being on hold. COVID is definitely an example of that, because people are quite anxious around that, but we are doing our best to work with everyone and alleviate and manage the risks of COVID. But also, again, with changes that are occurring in the service, people are wanting to see what's going on, I think. So it's about us increasing our offer of support, providing a culture of high support and high challenge to our foster carers, and also I think being innovative in terms of our practice, and we are scrutinising the number of not available placements at the current time to try and again look at where people are wanting to continue to foster, how we can support them to reintegrate back into the service and the fostering role. So looking at our training, development and support offer, supervisions, making sure that those are frequent and of good quality. And just really trying to engage and involve our foster carers. So we've done things such as a Facebook page, regular monthly consultations, really try to increase and improve participation. And number of places used for respite care, in 2019 to 2020, that was 35 on the annual average, and as of Q2, 60. Has anyone got any questions? No? If we go to the next one, please. So this is just an example of breaking down the number of not available placements. So there are a number of carers taking a break pending their resignation. That doesn't equate to the whole 18 fostering households. As I say, a number of foster carers are taking a break due to COVID. They have health needs which they feel that we can't safely manage with children coming and going from their home. Some have other personal issues in terms of their family, and some are just literally wanting to take a break. Then we have 29 where the needs of the child are currently in placement. We're really strong and robust in ensuring that where we are placing, where our children are becoming looked after, that we appropriately match them with their foster carers in that fostering household. So taking a contextualised approach to placing children and making sure that it's their needs that come first and foremost, and that we're looking at and scrutinising the level of skill and support need and vulnerabilities of our foster carers. There are 7 as of Q2 in this financial year whereby they're not available due to sibling only placements. So example, as I said before, was 2, 3 of siblings, 3, 4 of siblings, 1, 2 of siblings. And then we have two placements not available due to a young person turning 18 and being in stay and put arrangements. So really being claimed by that fostering family and supporting our children and young people as we would our own birth children in terms of you're 18, we're going to continue to support you, you can remain within the family home.
I've got one question on that, Jen. Are we taking feedback from people leaving the carer service, and are we storing that information and we making that information available as general feedback?
So do you mean, just help me to understand, so do you mean, is that specific reference to foster carers leaving the service?
Yes, if we have a foster carer leaving the service, are we getting feedback from them as their experience as a whole, and then storing that data as general data?
Yes, so we do. Yeah, we do have a satisfaction questionnaire, and currently we are working on developing that even further. And what we are also looking at is doing that intermittently throughout the year. So it's not a case of waiting until someone leaves that we're getting 360 feedback in regard to the service. We're trying to be proactive and getting a baseline of how everyone's feeling, what support they're being provided with, in order then we can look at where we need to focus our attentions in terms of support and communication, so on and so forth. But yes, in response to your question, we do that at the point of leaving, but also we are keen to, and we are currently developing that to be able to do that throughout the year.
Excellent. Councillor Wilson, were you swatting the fly away, or did you have your hand up? I think you might have been getting rid of a fly. Right, excellent.
Lee, I've got a bit of a connection problem. I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to move on? Do you want to move on to the next slide then, Jen?
Yeah, yes, please.
Sorry, Councillor Udin.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, can I just ask Jenny? You know the 7 sibling group carer, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Are they likely to take single children? You know, if need single child, if we need it, or purely just for the sibling group?
No, so this is where it can become a little bit confusing in terms of people's approval. So I could be approved to care for 2 children, but 3 of siblings. And the rationale for that would be if you maybe have 2 bedrooms that are available for the fostering role, of which one was big enough for 2 brothers or 2 sisters to be able to share a bedroom. Sometimes where we've got a sibling group of a brother and sister that have become looked after, then those 2 bedrooms would be utilised. So that 3rd young person, child that they would be approved for, they wouldn't be able to look after another young person because there isn't that physical space available. So that is what equates to that 7. So we do try to keep our, in terms of sufficiency, we do try to make sure that our foster carers that are able to care for more than one child would typically have related brothers and sisters in that fostering placement, but we can't always achieve that, but we do try to optimise that, and that is part of our matching consideration.
Right, okay, thank you.
On the back of that, Jen, are we able to identify any gaps in care provision? Do we know the reasons for it? For example, do we struggle to recruit or retain carers for more specialised placements, such as teenagers, mother and baby, children with significant health needs? Where are the gaps?
Okay, so the current gaps are parent and child foster placements. And what we are doing in respect to, I'll break it down into each one and explain to you what we're doing in regard to that. So we currently have one parent and child foster placement. It's quite ironic because I've had a conversation with these people today, and we're really keen to be able to drive that forward because, again, this is a couple that have come from an independent fostering agency through to Middlesbrough because they want to support us to develop the service. So what we're looking at, well, we're not looking, what we will be doing is we have monthly foster carer consultations. So what we've discussed this morning is that they will come to the February foster carer consultation to speak about their role in more detail, to generate some interest, so then we can get the momentum and put some support groups in place to look at people who may be interested, who haven't necessarily thought about offering parent and child provision previously, but may have the space, the availability and the skills, or need to be supported to develop the skills to offer parent and child placements, and doing something similar to hopefully creating 3 or 4 parent and child foster placements and looking at that as a support network on its own to support each other when things become challenging, which invariably they can at times, to be able to support each other and have that robust support network within that larger fostering support network as well. We are sibling groups, so brothers and sisters. That is definitely an area that we don't have as many foster carers for as we would like. We are focusing on that in addition to parent and child as part of our recruitment campaign. So we've got a light touch marketing campaign at the moment, and we are seeing some interest in regard to that marketing campaign and inquiries. We're not experiencing the huge spike as we have done previously, and I think from liaising with some of our colleagues in other local authorities and independent fostering agencies, COVID has had quite a significant effect on that. So it's not a case of we're in isolation in Middlesbrough. It's something that is being seen across a number of different services that we're linking in. And yeah, teenagers, so our children, young people aged 11 plus, that is also an area for development. So what we are doing, we're working closely alongside our Future for Families colleagues and making sure that we've got a really fluid and seamless interface between that, so we are able to support children that are currently in foster placement, but also looking at how children that are either on the edge of care or the edge of placement instability, how we can build in support networks to support these children and young people to remain where they're at or move in a planned way to known carers to them.
Brilliant, thank you. That answered another question I was going to ask about what we're doing with the Innovate team to put this right. So you answered that one as well. Thank you. Any other questions? Right, do you want to move on? Thank you.
Okay, so I think I've already broken this down really in terms of the number of not available placements. So this is where initially on the other slide it looks like we have 18 carers waiting to resign. That hasn't been the case. So we do have 7 households for personal health reasons, 2 pending resignation. We do have or did have 2 households where there's standards of care issues. So that would be where we have worries about practice of a foster carer, or allegation is being made, and we need to be able to explore that in a safe way to ensure that we're making the right decisions for our children. So that would be where, if there has been an allegation made, that if that child's not been able to remain in there given the severity, that we ensure that no child is placed there until we're absolutely clear and confident that assessment identifies it's appropriate for these people to either continue as foster carers or not, or whether there's a package of support needed or a combination of some of those. We have 2 fostering households where they have gone on to adopt the children that were initially placed in their care under a fostering arrangement. We have 2 fully approved connected carers awaiting the resignation. So legal orders have been granted, and then following that, and the carers given the resignation, it's 28 days thereafter before we can deregister foster carers. And then there's 3 households where updated assessment is required, and that links in with the standards of care, where we've had some worries. There's been information obtained that we need to do an updated assessment and look into before we can be confident of our children or young people being placed in that arrangement.
With each of those, is it the number of households or the number of places?
Households.
What's the total figure for places then?
If I go back. I don't think I've got that information to hand, but I can certainly find it out for you.
So what Councillor Cook is asking, I think, is always getting at is how many children, because of this, are coming back to us. Is that what you're asking, Chris?
Yeah, essentially that's it.
Sorry, I don't quite understand that question. How you've reframed it. So because of so what I'm hearing is if someone's on hold, so if we have 18 households on hold, the question is, of that 18 households, what does that equate to in terms of foster placements?
Yeah, that's the question he's asking,
Right.
I believe.
Yeah, that's it. Because I'm assuming that they're not single places, each one of those.
There'll be an array of different ones, and like I say, unfortunately, I don't have that information to hand, but I can certainly find that out and get that back to you by close of business, well, by lunchtime tomorrow.
Thank you. On to the next one, yeah.
So, as you'll see, in terms of recruitment in the financial year of 2019 to 2020, there were 123 initial inquiries, and during that time there was a marketing campaign.
Jen, how many? Sorry,
Go on.
sorry, I cut you off there. I thought you'd finished. What's the percentage rate of inquiries to actually the people making inquiries turn into foster carers? What's that?
So as of this financial year, our conversion rate from initial inquiries through to stage 2 assessments, or the full assessments, at which point we're really quite confident that these people are going to be approved as fostering households, or through to approval, because as you can appreciate, the time scales of that is quite lengthy. It's at least 20%.
And is that increasing year on year, or are we getting better at it, or?
From my understanding, from looking at previous figures, that this local authority and the fostering service has always been quite good in terms of that conversion rate from inquiries through to approved foster carers. That said, the last financial year there wasn't 20%, there wasn't 24 mainstream fostering households approved. I can speak from the data more accurately from this financial year, and certainly it's a conversion rate of around 20%. It's slightly higher, but as you can appreciate, it fluctuates. It's not static. We don't get massive influxes of inquiries. It's quite a steady trickle, but of that we are really receptive and responsive. So our aim is to be on par with independent fostering agencies, whereby an initial inquiry is made and we respond to that within 24 hours of that taking place.
I think it might be, if you're looking at the figures of initial inquiries are people who are interested in becoming foster carers. The conversion rate for me is quite important. So I think if we got so many years information of what we're turning that initial inquiry number into, and then if we could take that back a couple of years and then compare it with other authorities, if those authorities have got a higher conversion rate from the initial inquiry, then we need to see what they're doing better than what we're doing.
So when we speak, so we've got a number of members of staff that have joined around the same time frame as myself that have worked in other local authority fostering service and IFAs as well, with a couple specifically focused on that recruitment side. Their conversion rate is less than 10%. So we are doing, that is really one of Middlesbrough fostering service success stories around that conversion rate.
Councillor Walker.
Can I just say that she's right, Jenny's right. We have done really well. I mean, I've watched the conversion rates over the years and watched how the different, I think we've done lots of recruitment drives one way or another by putting posters out, things on buses, on TV. We tried many different venues and ways of recruiting foster carers, but we've always been pretty good with the amount of inquiries we get to convert them into actually foster carers. So I think, and our training is second to none really as well for our foster carers. And I think that's something that Middlesbrough does have to be proud of. So, you know, let's not chuck the baby out with the water. So, you know, I think we've got something good there, and let's continue in that. And I think we are doing so. I hope so anyway, Jenny. So let's see from the figures.
Well, yeah, Councillor Watt. If the evidence suggests that the other authorities have less than 10% conversion rate and we're on 20, then obviously we are getting the right people to make the initial inquiry, which is evidence based that we're doing that the right way. Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Cook.
I think we should never aim for 100% inquiry to conversion rate, because some of those people won't be suitable. So actually, it'd be quite good to know how many people we've turned away because we felt they're unsuitable.
Yeah, the reverse of what I was saying too. Yeah.
Okay, I can certainly, that's not within my gift to provide today, but I can certainly ask for that information and get that information collated. It is quite a complex thing to create because there's different stages at which people may be counselled out or may decide that fostering isn't for them from the initial phone call. So we are really robust. Again, we've tightened up our initial contact, our initial screenings. So again, we're as confident as we can be at the point of going out and doing our initial visits that this is what this household wants, and actually they would be in line with support to meet our services values and be an appropriate foster carer. But then there's all the further work thereafter. So there's a number of different stages that people may either rule themselves out or we may rule them out. So you're wanting it right from the point of that initial inquiry through to well, generally we won't get to stage 2 and cancel people out because the front bit will have been so robust. But is that what you want, Tim? Just to make sure I'm understanding what the ask is.
Yes, please.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I mean, what I was saying about the 20%. I mean, I know it's not a race to see how much you can get, or you know, a competition. But if we are putting initiatives out there to recruit foster carers, we need to base it on some sort of evidence that the recruitment process and the initiatives we're putting out there are working somehow. We need to make sure that that's the case. And obviously, there's a finite number of foster carers. So if we're getting initial inquiries and we see how many of them initial inquiries we are turning round to get foster carers, then that has got to be information that is relevant. It has to be.
Absolutely. And we are doing things different in terms of our marketing campaign. So we are using Google Ads again. We are looking at independent fostering agencies are really at the forefront of the recruitment strategies and how to bring inquiries in and subsequently foster carers. So we're trying to utilise a lot of practices like those that we know are tried and tested. So the example of Google Ads, social media, which is quite different to previous marketing campaigns, as I understand. But word of mouth is also an absolutely fantastic source of bringing new people into the service as well.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, Chair. Can I just ask, Chair?
Yeah, of course, Councillor Woodard.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks. Jenny, how are we managing this preparation training at the moment due to COVID, obviously the crisis thing? Does it make any difference? Obviously, are we probably doing the online training, are we?
So we are doing the group training virtually. So we're doing that across the board. So both with our induction process as well. So we're doing our skills to foster training with our mainstream carers. We've also developed training pathways through fostering, which is post approval for our mainstream carers, but also at the point of temporary approval for our connected carers, because what we're really wanting to do and drawing a lot of focus to is making sure that we support our mainstream and connected carers and give them the same training and development offer and support. So there's no disparity between the two. So we're doing a lot of training, well, we're doing all of our training virtually. Where there is a need for an individual specific reasons, we're doing work on a one-to-one with them. So we're trying to be as responsive again as we can, whilst ensuring that we're not, as a result of COVID, turning anyone away because we haven't adapted to the environment we're working within currently.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Cheers, Councillor Woodard. Can I bring in Councillor High?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question, Jennifer, if that's okay. As we know, we're currently going through a lot of improvement right across children's services, and there is always more to do. That's also relevant within the fostering service, and I'm aware that we're currently about to be or are being reviewed by North Yorkshire in relation to the service that we're providing. Not to put you on the spot too much, but and not for you to preempt the review that's ongoing, but what do you feel currently, Jennifer, is the key areas that we're likely to find out of the report? And what do you think the review is likely to show going forward in terms of what we should be looking to improve most?
Okay, so we've had a couple of meetings with our partners in practice from North Yorkshire, and the initial feedback so far is that we know our service really quite well. We know what we need to do in terms of improving and developing. So look, a specific focus on our structure, our staffing structure, because we can devise all sorts of plans to improve the service, but if we don't have enough staff to be able to implement these things, then we're gonna fall at the first hurdle. So one of the things that is being looked at currently is our staffing structure. The other thing that we are looking at is our financial procedure and offer to foster carers. And the other is our training support and development offer. But again, we're well underway with that. And I think they're going to be, in our policies and procedures, they're going to be the main areas that we're focusing on at the current time. In terms of, is there anything that we've discussed so far that we weren't already aware of as a service from our partners in practice? There isn't anything, and they've actually been really quite impressed, and from the meetings that we've had about the progress that we've made within the time frame that we've done that in. So within the last 9 months, we've gone from a situation of having quite a lot of work that has been unallocated, a lot of work that has been in significant drift and delay. Quality of assessments was okay, but not where we wanted it to be, and they've seen the quality of our assessments. We have no work unallocated. Our support and development offer is massively improved, and people are getting increasing clarity and confidence around their roles as fostering social workers, which will only serve to support our foster carers better than we ever have done before. So the feedback thus far is really positive from our partners in practice.
That's really encouraging.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jennifer, that's really encouraging to hear. In addition to obviously the positive contact that's been going on in relation to the review, there will no doubt be areas of learning, areas of development, areas of improvement that we're constantly striving for within children's services. What assurance can you give the room, really, Jennifer, of the next steps from that process in terms of how we're going to monitor any potential areas of improvement that we need to make going forward?
Okay, so it's that from using our performance management, we have we've got monthly management and performance meetings within the service and then externally as well, regular supervision and support of our staff, but also of foster carers as well. Making sure we're holding ourselves to account and very much creating a culture of radical candour whereby we have high support, which I think is something that us as a service have been quite good at. But we haven't always married that with high challenge as well, and clarity and confidence around expectations and holding ourselves to account. So we do have very clear expectations of our fostering social workers in terms of actions that need to take place, and the feedback again has been at times challenging, but actually following implementation of certain practices, i.e. frequent supervision, so we've got monthly supervisions of foster carers. The feedback's been really positive, that there was a level of anxiety first, but that people have found it really helpful and can see the positive impact thereafter. We're very much trying to create a culture where we do with, however, there is an understanding that at times we need to do, and then the conversations take place thereafter, but everyone's got that common goal and common purpose whereby we need to achieve the best for our and do our best for our looked after children and young people.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else got any questions on that, or can we move on? I think we can move on, Jen. Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of what's working well, I could probably sit here for quite a long time and tell you all about it. But there are, like I say, we're under no illusion that we get things right all the time. We absolutely don't. But we are really trying to create a culture where there's ongoing dialogue and conversation. But we are making some real progress in terms of our recruitment. We absolutely have tightened up that recruitment process to make sure that we are, as one of my colleagues have just noted before, making sure that it's the right people that are coming through to be assessed and ultimately approved as Middlesbrough foster carers. And we've streamlined that process. The recruitment campaign is underway. Like I say, it's not taken off to the level we would have hoped, but that's in line with other agencies, and we are meeting regularly with our marketing team. It's once a fortnight we're meeting with them to try and be as responsive as we can to what's going on. In anticipation for the marketing campaign and recruitment campaign, we have recruited a number of independent social work assessors to undertake Form F assessments if things do take off. So at the moment, it's not in terms of costing the authority any monies. It's not costing us anything because the agency staff that will only be paid upon will be paid upon completion of a Form F assessment. But we have staff there to be responsive to a surge in demand if required. There's been an awful lot of work being undertaken around connected care as part of the service. It was that part of the service that was putting really quite significant pressure across the wider service. That has now, whilst remains pressured, is nothing like we experienced when we've spoken with, particularly with our partners in practice, and gave them an idea of the volume of connected carers assessments that we've undertaken within the last 9 months. It was in excess of 150. Can't remember the exact numbers after, and they were really quite taken aback at the volume of work that's been undertaken to move things through the service to support our children to reach permanence in a timely way, but in the most appropriate connected care arrangement if that assessment concludes that. And we're also developing our supported lodgings provision to ensure that we've got robust assessments of potential providers. We have one supported lodgings worker at the current time, but at the moment what we are doing is we're linking in our social work staff within the recruitment team around those assessments. And the reason for that is we know from serious case reviews we've got our young children that are high risk, but also our older children and young people. And it's about us really making sure we're robust with these assessments, but also about the support thereafter to our supported lodgings providers. Whilst it's not foster care, it's support, it nevertheless is really important that we've got highly skilled supported lodgings providers to support our children and our young people in their development of independent skills through to adulthood and living independently. So there's lots that's working well, and I think I'd just like to say I'm really proud of the service and what they've achieved so far.
Thank you for that, Jen. I'm going to take questions. I'll go with Councillor Dodds first, then Councillor Odin. Councillor Dodds, you're muted.
Sorry, stop playing with my button. On the last slide, Jenny, and in the fifth paragraph, you mentioned connected persons, carer assessments. At the last meeting, we heard there's been a reduction in requests for connected persons care assessments due to greater scrutiny of the placement options available. But I think you explained there that this is changing now in what you've just said. Could you just highlight the difference between being a connected persons carer and a mainstream carer, and any issues that occur, including the support that is provided by the local authority?
Okay, so the difference between a connected carers, a connected foster carer and a mainstream foster carer is that a connected foster carer has a level of connection often related to that child or children, whereas our mainstream foster carers have no prior connection to that child or children. In terms of our support to any differences, we have to own the fact that previously there has been quite a difference between the level of support provided to connected carers comparative to mainstream carers. However, what we have got to the point of is our support, training, development offer to all of our approved carers. So I say that with carers from temporary approved connected carers through to them being to family placement panel, and our mainstream approved connected carers, they're all being provided with the same training, support and development offer. So they're all having inductions, they're all having monthly supervisions, they're all being supported to complete the training and development standards, they're all being offered additional training in line with their needs. They've all got really quite tenacious fostering social workers that will advocate on their behalf, but also on behalf of the children as well, to make sure that we have the best outcomes and things happen for our children and young people there. There's no drift and delay. So that's really been an area of really quite significant progress and development, whereby we've gone from, like I say, a number of unallocated assessments, a number of children being in unregulated care provisions in terms of connected carers, to moving that through, and now within the fostering service there's around 12 children that have in unregulated fostering placements due to the DBS of a foster carer, of a connected carer not being back, or a medical not being back. And again, we're dealing with those challenges as much as we can and being responsive to that. But in terms of our offer across the board, we're getting to a point where there should be no disparity between the offer provided to connected or mainstream carers.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Dodds. Take Councillor Odin, then Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Jennifer, I think it's a very good presentation. Actually, it's lovely here and nice to see, the sort of the improvement made and so on, with the overall children's services. Can you tell me the difference between the staying put and the supported lodging? What's different between them two?
Okay, so the staying put is where a child or young person has been in a foster care provision and the child or young person is reaching 18, and they're going to remain within that fostering household, so that then becomes a staying put arrangement. Supported lodgings. The in-house supported lodgings providers that we have, these aren't approved foster carers. So it's a differentiating between a young person needing care or support. Where we identify that a young person needs support and doesn't want to remain within that fostering household or whatever that care arrangement may be, and supported lodgings is identified as in line with their plan, that's where it's almost semi-independence, where within our supported lodgings providers, they go and live with this supported lodgings provider in that home and are supported to develop and progress with independent skills, with a view of ultimately being able to move on to live independently.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewin. Councillor Walker.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Right, Jenny, just a couple of things really. The connected carers, I know from past experiences, some of the connected carers have been reluctant to take training and to do any training because they feel, well, they've been parents, so why can't I just look after this child, you know, and that's why. And so there's been a reluctance. How are you dealing with that? Because I would imagine that's still a very difficult situation to be in, because the children need, obviously, when they take on grandchildren for whatever reasons, they feel that, you know, they don't need to take any of that training, but they still want to access the help and financial help, etc., from the council. So how do you deal with those sort of situations? And secondly, you're working with Pathways, I would imagine, regarding the children who are coming out of care and are an independent. Pathways team are involved in that. And how many officers have we got working in the Pathways team now? There we are. Two things for you to answer, Jenny, approximately.
I'll try to remember all. So in terms of, sorry, my retention is not the greatest. So the first question was connected carers. Sorry,
you're as bad as me. The connected carers. I know from past experience that sometimes connected carers can be reluctant regarding any training to be foster carers, and although they don't want any other children, they only want those children.
Yeah.
It can be difficult for them to access other areas of the services otherwise.
Okay, so what we do is we're transparent from the beginning in terms of what expectations are, but also with that level of transparency, providing support, being flexible, looking at how we develop and devise our training. So doing different times of the day, looking at whether actually it would be helpful to do it at a weekend, look at doing things like what I would refer to as homework. So being really responsive to what people are able to do, and where people aren't going to be able to engage with a group activity, that being undertaken on a one-to-one. So it's about us being really clear from the onset, but also really mindful, as you've rightly noted, that more often these connected carers are, their whole lives are turned upside down. They've often got the household to run, their own children, then they have other children, the relatives move in with them, they're being assessed as foster carers, they're becoming involved with children's services, and that might be completely unique to them. And so it's really about hand-holding as much as we possibly can to really support our connected carers from the point of temporary approval. But a lot of it is around education and being really upfront and honest right from the beginning about what we need to do, and looking at different ways of practicing to enable these people to be able to achieve that. In terms of Pathways, I remembered that bit. I'm not sure, I won't be able to give you an accurate answer to that at the moment in terms of the staffing levels there, unfortunately.
That's okay, no problem at all. Thanks, Johnny. Thank you.
Bring Sue in. Sue.
I thought Sue might be able to give me an answer.
Yeah, the Pathways staffing. Yeah, there has been an issue in Pathways team with some cover, maternity leave cover, for example, and sorry, I'll take a back step. If you remember in the Ofsted inspection, there was criticism that the personal advisors' caseloads were too high.
Yeah.
I think they were up at something like 36 at the time. Extra resources were put in to lower those caseloads. However, there has been some, in the meantime, some people leaving or transferring to another team, and there also has been maternity leave. So that put the caseloads back up a bit. However, with somebody coming back off maternity leave quite soon, for example, that would take it just about down to the right levels again. So it's not been without issue, but it is. So it got better, it slipped a bit again, but it is now getting back to where it needs to be. So yeah, and I'm very much hopeful that. I'm very much hoping that it will stay that way. Caseloads in teams can, change, don't they? And people leave and people come back and all of those things. But I'm quietly confident that it is at the right level now.
Right, lovely. Thanks very much, Sue. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Wilson, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. Jenny, just a daft one. Do we have a preferred age limit for foster carers, young or older or middle age, anything like that?
No, it's very bespoke to that individual or that couple and their skills, abilities, health. We could have someone who's 25 with a number of really complex health needs that might, for whatever reason, make it untenable for them to be foster carers. Not that necessarily having really complex health needs would do that. And you can have really sprightly 60-year-olds. In terms of our demographic of foster carers, we've got people from their 20s, early 20s, right through to our older end of the spectrum is fostering households where the couple are in the 70s. And every single household brings its own uniqueness and skills and greatness, really, in terms of the offer for our children and young people.
So
Yeah.
we're looking at potential foster carers as individuals, not age groups, not just individuals, how they can come up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sorry, Groom, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, it's just I'm 69. That's me and the wife spoke about with a child child care. I'm not quite sure I'm going to shut up to myself. I'm 69. I fancy the ideas. I think kids just need a little bit more help in their life to get them started in a lot of cases. I'm just curious what sort of age would be right to do that sort of thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
I would be more than happy if you want to send me an email and I can get one of our colleagues from the recruitment team to give you a call and talk it through with you if you would like that.
I'll go to the wife, Jenny, see what she says. She's the boss on this one.
Thanks, Groom. Councillor Lowy.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask Jenny, do we have anything specific to recruit the Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups? And do we have a significant proportion of children who are looking for, who are needing foster care, who are able to be matched with such groups, or is that not a factor? Do we match across the different divides of ethnicity, etc., etc.?
Okay, so there's a few questions in that, isn't there? So in terms of being able to culturally match our children and young people with foster carers, we're not always able to do that. Things that we are doing to try and develop and support that is we are currently in the process. There's lots of things that we're setting up at the moment. So we are setting up a support group for foster carers who are caring for children of Muslim faith, but also for children, the foster carers of Muslim faith, because one of the things that's been quite evident is that we have quite a diverse population of our looked after children, and being able to try and support our children to have day-to-day carers if they were in their own families proves a challenge. And so it's about sharing all of that information and understanding, particularly around our children's use the area of faith of Muslim children at the moment, because it's a starting block, and we've had a number of carers express an interest in being involved in that. So what we're hoping is that the word of mouth will spread and that these foster carers' experiences with our service will serve to bring more people in. And we also would like a diverse range of our foster carers to be involved in our marketing campaigns as well, so that we're demonstrating at our first interface that fostering is for a diverse range of people, irrespective of ethnicity, religion, gender, sexuality.
Could I just come back there, Chair, please?
Yes, please.
I think there is a challenge. As far as I know, I think we have one BME foster carer. I think she's Muslim, actually, and I spoke to her some time ago. And I'm working with Adoption Tees Valley, and it's with a similar issue about how do we up the recruitment of some of our minority groups who might not have a wide enough understanding. How do we bring them on board? How do we educate them? So I think there is a need there for them. But I think it's quite a complex issue and needs quite a lot of in-depth research, isn't it? Whether we get examples from different areas of the country on their campaigns, their marketing campaigns, to be very inclusive. That's what I was thinking about. But I know it's quite a challenge for us at the moment, isn't it?
It is, but and we're doing what's currently within our gift to try and maintain and sustain our foster carers of various different backgrounds and cultures, and whilst also first and foremost making sure that we're supporting our children in line with their also cultural identity as well. And like I say, we're not just sort of living in hope that this will then convert into foster carers, but this is a start of what we need to do to start the conversations, to start the support groups and getting the message out there within the wider community as well.
Councillor Udin.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Yeah, on the back of that, can I just ask then, Jenny, do we have any sort of foster carer who would cater for the complex children with the complex needs, like a specialist foster carer? With the disabilities and so on.
So in terms of specialist foster carers, we have our parent and child foster carers, and also within the Future for Families, we have a specialist foster care and supported lodgings provider there. Other than that, I would say, I think all of our children come with their own histories of things that have happened that then lead to trauma, which lead to impact, and often we see impact of that in terms of emotional behavioural presentation. So I think that the notion of complex can be quite misleading, if that makes sense. So for us, it's more about looking at what are the needs of that child, and looking at our foster carers and what package of support we need to put in place for the child, for the foster carers, and then as a collective, as a family, as a household, to support them with that. Because I think different people's interpretation of what could be considered complex can vary. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
yeah, it does some extent. But I meant by complex needs, obviously, the children with the disabilities. You know, some of the disabled children with the the physical mobilities and so on. You know, so I mean, anybody can take them. You know, it's children coming to care with the disabilities. That's what I meant.
okay. So again, we'd very much be looking at what that individual child's needs are, and looking at our cohort of foster carers that have availability, and be looking at what a strengths-based approach of what we can do to support that children and young person remaining in house with a mainstream foster carer. We don't have anybody that is specifically for children with physical or learning disabilities.
So we're going back basically to looking at individuals and matching individuals and seeing how they're matched up. Yeah. Is that okay, Councillor Udin? Right then, if there's no more questions for Jennifer, Jen, that was absolutely brilliant, in depth, and the questions, you showed an excellent knowledge, even from veering from the slides. You know exactly what you're talking about. You answered every question, how it was asked. You know, you got to the point, the bones of everything. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And just thank you for that. It was brilliant. Right, we're going to move on. Are you leaving us?
I will do, because I've got to drop my husband off at work. So
right. Well, thank you very much.
But thank you for your time. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Right, guys. That was brilliant. That was a good presentation. Lots of questions answered. We're going to move on to item agenda number 5, which is the corporate parenting strategy. A copy of the corporate parenting strategy has been circulated with the agenda, as I felt it was appropriate for the panel to have sight of it. Bill Robinson, Children's Services Programme Manager, is here today to provide the panel with a brief presentation to highlight key headlines within the strategy. I would draw the panel's attention to the final page of the strategy, which is the performance scoreboard for the corporate parenting programme, and shows the areas that are or are not on target. So if I could pass that over to Bill. Excellent.
Thank you.
He's on the ball already sharing the information.
Great. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Caroline, for sharing the slides. Have I got sound and everything?
Yes.
Okay. Jolly good. Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm conscious, as Councillor Garvey said at the beginning, that some of you have had this presentation previously, or a version of it, and been party to some of these conversations, but equally that this is such a critical agenda for the council and partners, and that you're going to come at this from a from a particular perspective today. So if we work on the same principle as the last presentation, Chair, if that's okay, do please come in at any point with questions, but I will stop after each slide for anything specific. I'll do my best either to respond in detail or to take a note and take it away and respond swiftly afterwards on any statistical detail that I don't have immediate access to. Sue is certainly well cited on this, and Rachel, who wasn't able to be here today, would also has some kind of real-time information. Okay, could we start with slide 3, I think, please, if that's okay. I mean, just briefly, I think that's the kind of starting point really to track back to here is around the improvement plan back at the sort of beginning of last year, which was another piece of work that I was quite closely involved in. And it was clear in there that a very significant stream of the improvement and transformation work that was headlined through Ofsted and other insights was around the whole journey of children and young people who are in and around the care of the local authority. So we needed to revisit our strategy for children in care, and what we did around that, I'll come on to the sort of shape of this in a minute, but we stitched in the kind of big ideas and the vision and the principles around how we wanted to approach corporate parenting with children and young people. But we've also built into the strategy some of our plans around kind of commissioning and sufficiency, so how we ensure we've got the right and best possible placements and homes for children in the system, and our permanency arrangements, which is kind of how we practice and work with children, and how social work leads to positive outcomes for them. So we pulled together corporate parenting with sufficiency and permanency. Perhaps also just to say that whilst the strategy is, if you've had a chance to look at the document, I mean, these can be very dry, and often are very dry documents. They're necessarily, detailed to a degree. But what we've tried to do with the strategy is draw a clear big picture. What is it we need to do? How do we know this? What are our big ideas and how we want to land them? What are the kind of principles that drive that? And then there are other very detailed but quite sort of systematic, kind of clearly structured documents that sit behind this strategy, which are operational action plans that take these strategic ideas into the doing. And the important thing right now, especially as we move increasingly well into 2021, is that work is being done, and there is some early impact from that, which perhaps we can discuss in a moment. And perhaps just to pull out the point about consultation, because I mean, particularly in the context of COVID and all the things we know about the last year, there was quite a challenge to pull off how do we develop a strategy for corporate parenting, which, as much as, if not more than, many other pieces of work within children's services, is a bit of work that really needs that feed-in from the experience and the voice of children and young people across the piece. How do you do that in the context of COVID? So we lined up the development of the strategy with the work that was being done by colleagues in the council around Middlesbrough Children Matter and the branding that you can see all through these and other slides, and that helped us to play in the voice of children and young people through various focus groups that were pulled together by the participation team in the council. And we also had some quite direct involvement from a number of kind of sort of middle to older teenagers and care leavers who fed into the principles that lie at the heart of this strategy, and they're reflected on a slide as we run through these in a moment. So that's kind of the background and how we've gone about this. Can I pause the principle of that? That's interesting. That slide's doesn't look like it's some of the diagrams. I wonder if some of the diagrams are going to work. This has happened before on one or two WebExes that we've done. Perhaps I'll just pause a second. Any questions on any of the things I've just covered? Nope. No. I take silence as tacit agreement. For somebody who works on eye contact a lot, I still don't quite function on these meetings as well as one might. So if we can move on to the next slide. Okay, I think we'll skim this one because it's not coming up on. Caroline, there is an alternative here, which when this didn't work previously, I shared direct from my screen where it seemed to make a difference on the. I mean, it's fine. I can just talk to them because these aren't long, complicated slides. But if people want to see them, do you want me to have a go?
That slide actually fed through. I was getting that full slide there. Were
you with the diagrams and everything?
It came through after a while. Yes, it did feed through.
Right.
Was that the case for everybody else on the panel? No. Right.
Sorry. Can I just interrupt, Chair? I think, Bill, the presentation that was sent across to me didn't have any diagrams on that. The one that Caroline was showing was how it was sent across.
Okay.
So maybe they missed out as they've transferred over. I'm not sure. Okay. So apologies that I wasn't aware there was any diagrams missing.
If it's the look up, I got that one.
Chair, I mean, if it helps, I'm happy to try sharing from my screen here and see if that makes a difference. If not, I can just talk to them because they're not. I mean, there's not many of them, and they're not massively labelled.
I think it would help to see the slides, Bill, because it just gives an illustration going forward. So, if you, from my point of view, Chair, with respect, I'd like to Bill to share his.
Yes,
we'll try. It may not be any different, but we'll give it a go.
Yeah, that's better, Bill. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the previous slide, I think, which was the one that we were just on, and I mean, I don't want to over-labour this because, in a sense, this is quite generic and runs through a lot of the work of the council, but it's just really making that point about, maybe it doesn't need making, but it felt very, very loud and important in this piece of work that we play in the voice of children increasingly in very practical and real ways, really. And this is some examples of how that's happening in children's services and across the council at the moment. And in particular here, I guess the policy and planning piece is most relevant. That whilst we're talking a big picture strategy here, and this is how we're going to build and develop the way we work across the system over the next 2-3 years, that voice of the kids involved has actually directly really helped to shape and influence that piece of work, despite the conditions we were working under. I don't think it's perfect, and I think doing an implementation of this is clearly the important thing. Anything on that slide from people? No. I'll move on.
Yes, please.
Okay. Again, this is a bit dry, but, and I've kind of said it, so I'll be very brief here. So the corporate parenting strategy, so the green bubble, is the whole. That's how this piece of work is framed, and that's the headline. What is our vision? What are our ideas and our ambitions for children and young people in Middlesbrough who are in our care? And then the other two bubbles beneath that, the yellow one is the permanent. In some authorities, you'll see a corporate parenting strategy, a permanency strategy, and a sufficiency strategy. And I think what we felt here was it's all, in a way, they're all three parts of the same story. The permanency and sufficiency bits are how we develop our social work offer, and how we ensure that the right homes and opportunities are there for children. So we stitched that into a single story here. Does mean it's perhaps a bit longer and a bit more complicated in parts than it might be, but it meant that we've stayed focused in the work we've done around the strategy, and not invested undue time in writing long documents, and rather sort of clarity of message, and then getting out there and doing it, and doing the detailed action plans has been the priority, really. Any questions on that structure?
I make a statement, Bill. As a ward councillor, and I get foster carers come to me for help. What I've started doing, instead of taking on the individual problem, what I've started asking them to do is to read through this document and tell me what it says we are wanting to do and what we're not doing.
Right.
And that way, it gives me more of an idea of what we're getting wrong. So that way, I've found it to be more to take a more generic approach to people asking me for help, to find out exactly where the help is needed. And I thought that's just an idea I would share with the panel.
That's a very powerful statement, isn't it? Because that immediately takes what can sometimes feel like sort of abstract, sort of local authority conversations about plans straight into the real world and people's sort of lived experience. I mean, what I'd be really interested, I mean, perhaps probably not for now, was actually what you're hearing back from that, and the extent to which this, what are people thinking we're delivering and not, and how this tallies, really.
That's coming, Bill.
Yeah. Okay, shall I move on?
Yes, please.
This one, okay. These, I hope you can. I've tried to avoid sort of small writing in these diagrams, but just to be clear, these are the guiding principles that very much set the frame for the strategy, and these have come directly from the consultation work that was done with children, particularly the young people involved, who'd all in various ways been through the system of support in Middlesbrough in recent years, and some still are. And they actually made short videos as well to go with each of these principles, which for technical reasons have been really difficult to share online. But I mean, some of these look like, absolutely the right things and what you'd expect to be in here. So yeah, okay. But the interesting thing is when you look at some of the conversations, the records of those conversations, and the videos actually that some of the young people did to go through these, is you then get an immediate sense of the power of their experience and behind these principles. Some of them are really positive stories, about key adults who very often were, council staff or related support workers. And some of their stories equally are really sobering ones about how they've ended up in the circumstances they are and what has or hasn't helped them through that. But again, I mean, back to the Chair's comment a moment ago, it's those conversations have grounded this piece of work in some sense of young people's reality. And these principles were our reference point for writing the strategy and will continue to be a return point as we move through it. Okay, anything on that slide?
Nope, we'll move on.
Okay. Okay, just I think it was important to make a point that there are some things, I mean, increasingly so as we move into an improvement situation in Middlesbrough, but also at the beginning of this journey, it was not an entirely deficit exercise doing the strategy. Yes, there was an awful lot that needed to improve across the piece, but there were a lot of things going well, or elements of things going well, and there's another slide in a moment, which is it's based on end October, early November data, but it kind of begins to illustrate some more and more positive impact. So these are just some points. So it's tricky how you phrase these things in these kind of presentations in the context of being on an improvement journey and still needing to improve. But so these things aren't said casually or like they're finished jobs. Clearly not. But you know, there are green shoots, positive developments. There is evidence that children and young people's that placement stability is improving. There's evidence that there's less drift and delay in the system, and the sort of pace and focus of children's journey through support and care is improving. School attendance for children in care is improving, decreasing fixed term exclusions, those kind of important things. And visits and contacts and timescales and that kind of direct social work input is having an increased positive impact. So that's not a kind of high-fiving slide, but it's an indication that there are some green shoots, and it's trying to get the balance in here around recognising significant improvements needed alongside some things going well. It may help the conversation if there are questions, if I move this into the next slide, which I think is the one with the okay, well, this is where we need to improve. Then there's a slide around the current picture and some data. These are areas for improvement you will be broadly familiar with from the last 9-12 months around the improvement process, and some issues you've touched on already in the conversations today. So better earlier identification of children on the edge of care who may be at risk of coming into care, and how we can put in place more effective arrangements both for identifying and offering some kind of support that can help them in that circumstance. Timeliness, whilst quality and timeliness of permanence planning with children and that stuff we talked about around drift, delay, etc., is improving, there is still significant room for improvement and things we can do better. And equally around the availability of placements and the most suitable places to live, both as a respite and long term. Emotional and mental health support is an increasingly significant issue for children and young people. You'll know, especially in the current climate, lockdowns and COVID have really put an extra kind of layer on demand and children and families' experience there, and that was already an improvement issue, and I think is increasingly something needs seriously looking at. Educational attainment in certain areas for children in care, employment and training outcomes, and some of those related issues that are also bulleted on that slide. I won't labour it, but and then perhaps with that sort of trio of slides, I'll then stop on this one. This is based on data that this slide went to the corporate parenting board to support the sign-off of the strategy a short while back, and it's based on data up to the end of October. What we see here is that the proportion of children in our care that has increased hugely. I mean, you know all of this, but I think sometimes it's worth just revisiting and headlining it. The increase exponentially over the last 5 years was very significant, 89% or so over 5 years, which the national trend was very similar, but even so in Middlesbrough it was very significant, even taking account the national picture. In recent months, there is evidence that that numbers of have slightly reduced, and again, that's not flag waving. It's interesting to note there are some green shoots of positive levelling out and reductions in numbers. I think the number of children in care in Middlesbrough today, as we speak, is around 600 and I've got 632. So I don't know if that's if you can clarify that. That's come down from a high of about 700, 702, I think it was in July, August. So
if we could have a moment of flag waving, Bill, I'd be really appreciative of it, because we were down, last time I looked, it was 629. So if you think that, you know, we were almost at 700 in July, we went slightly above that figure, and now we're down to 629. It's 70 odd children who are looked after are now are now not looked after, and the benefits that will bring, concerted pieces of work, and it's children where it's been safe to do so. So I do hope that I'm sure that it will come down further, but as we move through children who should have been in their permanent forever homes already, it will slow. But I think that social workers and team managers and frontline staff should be really proud of the efforts that they have made, and it is supported by the strategy and the need to work with children and young people who are looked after in a very timely way.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, and I I think what's interesting is when you look at that significant gradual but significant reduction, that there is evidence to show that that's not a game of chance, actually, and that this is about progressive, focused improvement work taking place to help move children on to the most appropriate placement with the kind of pace and focus that's required. So there is some really encouraging news there, and it's not happening by chance, really. It's about a focused approach. Children's services across the council and with partners. Shall I just pause there for any further sort of discussion, question, comments?
Yeah, well, the first one, I've a question I've got, Bill. Again, it's going to asking foster carers to comment on the document, and the first comment I got back was, what do they mean by an intent to do when they say robust and innovative multi-agency wraparound support for foster carers to support vulnerable and high-risk placements?
Could you just repeat the question again, Councillor? And I'm just...
Yes, of course. So, what do they mean by an intent to do when they say robust and innovative multi-agency wraparound support for foster carers to support vulnerable and high-risk placements?
We have, as you know, Futures for Families that I know the development of Future for Families No Wrong Door has been, I'm sure, at this scrutiny committee before. And so what we are doing is very much supporting, well, we support children on the edge of care, both children who are in edge of care who are in danger of going into care, but also children who might be coming out of care. But one of the things also that both the Innovate team, the managed team that we've commissioned to work with looked after children, and Futures for Families have been supporting fragile placements. So it is about sustaining placements where they need to be sustained. It is about stopping placement moves, because we know that changes of placement are, unless they are planned changes, are not can affect children's outcomes. So that multi-agency, if you think about Futures for Families, has differently skilled practitioners within that. But it is also about the joining up of work through the improvement board, but also that sort of bringing together of work and bringing together of aim and bringing together of the things that are in the improvement plan that starts to bring that multi-agency approach. Now, will every foster carer have noticed that? No, they won't. yet. It's still quite early days. Futures for Families only went live in September. And particularly some foster carers who've had very stable placements won't have seen this more multi-agency thrust, as it were. But that's in general terms what we're meaning by multi-agency.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question before I come in with my second? Councillor Alawi.
Thank you. In terms of what you said, Sue, it may be useful, mate, not to give us and maybe other foster carers some examples occasionally of the impact of the multi-agency approach, as to demonstrate that these are the things that are going on. So I was thinking, for example, in terms of maybe some of the more vulnerable placements and some of the challenging behaviour of certain young people, you know, do we give families support with, you know, training in how to deal with adolescence, for example, or the psychology of adolescence, or, you know, how to be practical and do X, Y, and Z when this and that and the other happens. So we have a little sort of bank of supporting ideas that anybody else might want to dip into and share as examples of good practice, and how we could emulate that in terms of all the different homes with different children at different levels.
I think there is a bank of good practice, but of course that the good practice and what every child needs will be better. Will be different, sorry. I think that it might be a good idea to invite Futures for Families back to talk about some of the skills that they've got. For example, I mean, skills go wider than Future for Families, but I think they're encapsulated there. And they can give some anonymized examples, but they've got some very skilled, and one of they've got a psychologist who is badged as a life coach, so it doesn't feel like a heavy intervention to children and young people. So so I think it might be a good idea. I mean, there are some good examples of work that they've done, and yes, certainly they would be looking to share skills, and also for their practice to be shared, disseminated into social work teams as well. So we're skilling up those teams. But yeah, I mean, with respect to the chair, it might be something that we ask Futures for Families to come in and specifically focus on.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Some evidence based. Excellent. Does anybody else have any other questions before I come with my second? No. Right. Bill, this is one of our foster carers. She's read the corporate parenting strategy, and the question was on access to specialist support mental health services. She's taken 3 statements. You get swift access to specialist support when you need it, swift access to mental health support services and therapies, and easy access to specialist support for emotional and mental health and well-being. A statement on these comments were, at no point when asking for support for the child in our care was accessing specialist support, mental health services or therapy swift. 4 months wait to play therapy. She's put this in brackets. Who was paying was the issue. Over a year of backwards and forwards with CAMS, who said they couldn't help twice, quoting once that they had no budget to help children in care. What timescale do they think is swift? Now I know this is going onto CAMS, but it's one of our foster carers asking for help, and she's read our corporate parenting strategy, and she's not agreed with we try to do what's said in there. What can we say to that lady? So
okay with you, Bill, I'll come in.
Yeah, of course.
I think this is a new strategy which is just in the time of being signed off. We know also that social work practice, I would think I'm talking about in specifically here, has had to improve over the last year. And we know that we've come from a very low base, so we're seeing green shoots of practice. That's a more general statement, really. We have at the improvement board, actually, I think it's the week after next. No, apologies, it's next week. We have Tuve coming to the improvement board to actually be held to account a bit on why does the service what is the service that is offered to children and young people? Now, they are very clearly saying that there is no resource for looked after children, specific resource for looked after children. And we would say, well, actually, these are your children too. Why is that resource not there? And I know that there was some resource which has been dissipated. So I think that for that specific foster carer, the answer is, yeah, we absolutely get what she's saying. The wait has been too long. Looked after children who are our most vulnerable children have not received the priority that they deserve, and we're seeking to rectify that. It's not, this strategy is what we want to do and where we're working hard to get to. But I think it's quite telling that the spotlight session, which comes at the end of every improvement board, the first spotlight session that isn't being done by children's services is one looking at mental health, and one particularly looking at CAMS and the service they offer. And in those sessions, you're held to account. So I think it's telling that they're the next ones, as it were. There also is, as I understand it, and I'd need to go back and check out the initiative, some look at where we might get additional funds from. But that's where we are at the moment in our relationships. I think the relationships are improving by dint of being able to have some of those conversations. But again, there's quite a long way to go. And this is something where we have to influence another agency, because we don't have, we aren't able to direct those agencies. We can only influence.
Thank you. So both the answers to both questions I've asked have been put forward. My answer was similar to the answer you gave, but at the end of the day, people are coming to me and asking me, so I'm putting their voice forward. Now, I did say very similar to what you've just said to this lady. Things have changed. There's big changes being made. Bear with us, and we'll get there. So it wasn't all just doom and gloom on that question. I was just putting that point of view forward, so she understood that we are listening and we are changing things. We definitely are. And it's very interesting that you mentioned budget and money, because one of the other questions, obviously, it says on the slide that's there about the increase of 89% over the last 5 years. Somebody's asked me, has the budget increased by 89% over the last 5 years? And what would you say to them on that?
Well, Councillor, we know that children who have been looked after in external residential placements, that's where the primary costs, that's where the bulk of the costs come from. And we've talked, I think, at this committee to some extent about that, because we've known that we've had 74 children in external residential placements, and they are very expensive placements. Now, I'm not saying that some children and young people don't need that expensive provision, because it will also be provision that meets their needs. But we know that the increase in costs is primarily down to external residential placements. So, for example, a foster placement at, say, £800 a week with an independent fostering agency, the cost of that is very different, isn't it, from an external placement, which could be £5, £6, £7, maybe £8,000 a week. So you can see that there's a difference in cost. Now, we're not talking about moving placements because of cost, we're talking about moving placements because of need. But as the numbers of looked after children have come down, so have the numbers of children in these external and unfortunately very expensive placements. So the increase has primarily been down to external residential placements, and that's coming down. Yeah, we've used external placements far too freely, in my view, which is why no external placement is made. I was going to say over my dead body, but that's not quite the right answer, but it has to get through me first. And then I go to some significant lengths to assure myself that it is actually needed. So costs are coming down, and in terms of cost avoidance, I haven't got those exact figures in my head, but that's the reason. That's the principal reason why why the costs have gone up, and the principal reason why they're beginning to come down.
Thank you. So, does anybody else have any other questions? No. Bill, would you like to continue?
Yeah, well, we're almost there in terms of slides. Forgive me, this is taking time to respond. Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just really just to move towards a close. I mean, having gone through that process of looking at the evidence, what do we know we need to get better at in Middlesbrough? Where are the strengths and the sort of positive building blocks that we can start to build that from? What do children and young people tell us are their priorities, their principles? That plays through then into 6 priorities, really, the 6 sort of headlines, which under which the strategy has been constructed. So that's the 6 priorities here, and I mean they've been reflected in many respects in the conversation we've just been having. Are there any questions on that slide specifically though before moving? So perhaps just one point to make was that which came up in the conversation we had with the corporate parenting board. I mean, what was interesting about this was that these 6 priorities came through very clearly in the original improvement plan back at the beginning of last year, actually. And when we went through the more detailed process for the corporate parenting strategy, they played through, you know, equally, really. So we didn't have to look hard to see these were the clear 6 driving areas of priority. And the detailed action plans that staff at the front line of the business are now delivering are structured around these six areas. So there's a very clear kind of approach to this. Okay, that's the presentation. So unless people want to dwell on any other slide, I'll stop screen sharing at that point.
Thanks, Bill. Are there any questions for Bill or Sue? Any further questions? No. Councillor Cook, Councillor High, I know I can't see you. Any questions from either of you two?
I'm good, thank you, Chair.
I'm good.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for that. Thanks for to Sue to candidly answering the questions that came in. It's quite a direct approach, asking questions directly from members of the public. But it's, you know, at the end of the day, if the people who are foster carers asking questions directly, and if they do relate to what we're talking about in these committees, then it can only be good practice to bring them up.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Good.
Right then. I'm writing so much down. I've lost my agenda. There it is. Right. So we'll move on to item agenda number 6, which is COVID recovery in children's care. Sue's going to provide a verbal update on this item as she has done in the past. Thanks, Sue. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As part of the improvement plan, we thought it was right to just share some of the work we're doing to work through COVID. I think just as we got the improvement plan, or as we were getting the improvement plan up together, COVID hit. And we want really to illustrate that, you know, improvement hasn't stopped. It might be a different improvement, but we want to work, continue to work as best as we can with children and young people. But I just wanted to talk about some of the things that we are doing to work through COVID. I've asked that I come to this committee and to the Education and Skills Committee and just give a brief update really on the work through COVID that is happening at the moment. So we are, at the moment we have, particularly as COVID, we're in wave 3 and it's really important to talk about this in that context. We have what we call a bronze meeting within children's services, and this is where we look where some of the stresses and strains might be in terms of individual working with head of service. So we've discussed things quite recently, for example, about social workers visiting not children's homes, but children's homes with them. So And we also have a silver meeting, which is where heads of service to go and share operational matters around working with through COVID. And then we have a gold meeting, which is a meeting that Tony chairs. And it really is about looking at strategic matters in terms of, so for example, laptops has been one of the things that we've discussed. Well, actually, we've discussed access to remote learning, and laptops has been one element of that. So we've talked about, one of the things that we talk about consistently is vulnerable children. And in working with vulnerable children are children, in this context, children who have a social worker. So I think it's important to just remember that. So we are we are very focused on tracking where our vulnerable children are. So are our vulnerable children in school or not in school? And it's, should they be at school, or actually does it suit their needs to be at home in this period of remote learning? Have they got a vulnerability as on top of them being vulnerable children that would mean that actually being home is okay? So if a vulnerable child is not in school, we need to know about it. So we have a system with a dedicated line where head teachers can phone in the fact that a vulnerable child has not been in school. Then what happens is that's taken by the person answering the phone. They put a note on the children's system, and then that's relayed to the social worker. And the work is the information is ragged. So if it's ragged red or amber, we do a risk assessment. We don't if it's lower at green. I mean, but part of a social worker's skill has got to be to decide whether something is red or amber. So in that way, we're trying very, very hard to make sure that our vulnerable children, we know where they are. And COVID, and whether children are in and out of school, because that's happened a little bit, particularly in wave 2, and actually at the beginning of this term when children went off to school with their satchels swinging behind their backs, and within a few hours they were back again. So it's been really important to track where our vulnerable children are. But also, in my view, children who are on child protection plans are probably the most vulnerable because they're going home where looked after children should be in safe placements. Of course, their learning is incredibly important. But is a child on a protection plan, are they safe at home? Because actually we're concerned about how parents are looking after them. So we've been looking at laptops to ensure that children have the access to the resources that they need, and we've been liaising with the Department of Education. Schools have had 10,000 laptops, and we also look at connectivity. So children haven't got laptops that they can't, use because of connectivity. We've rung round schools in our local authority, and schools have asked for 700 more laptops. We know that also voluntary organisations, some children have got laptops already. You can use PlayStations and some other equipment to make sure. Now, some of the demand varies from schools to schools, so we're trying to key in to make sure that those schools get the equipment they need, and that is also vulnerable children, but also those children who are just sort of on the edge of being vulnerable. So we've had guidance go out about visits, and the recent guidance is very much about visits should be face-to-face wherever possible, and they should only be virtual visits in exceptional circumstances. So that means that we social workers need to be very careful about the way that they are working when they are visiting a home. There is guidance, for example, and for visiting foster carers. So, for example, you ring ahead. Has anyone got COVID symptoms? Is anyone self-isolating? Is anyone critically vulnerable? Then when we get to the house, we ask again, is there anybody in the house? We've got PPE, we've got protection, we've got visors, we've got, hand sanitation, all of those things. We're very clear on what should and shouldn't happen when a social worker is visiting a home. In terms of social workers, we're all working from home. In terms of children's services, we're just about all working from home. So that is, again, one way in which we are working. For some social workers, that's a good thing to do. For others like me who like to talk, being in the office is probably more preferable, except there's nobody else there. I'm slightly being facetious, but the very clear message is you work from home. For some, particularly maybe a newly qualified social worker, that's quite isolating because one of the ways that you learn is from somebody else in your team. But nonetheless, that's a very clear way that we're working with COVID and making sure that workers are visiting our most vulnerable children. We also have been looking to support head teachers. Head teachers, I feel, are under particular pressure at the moment. And some of them have told me that they feel like they're running two schools. One, a virtual school where the remote learning is happening, but one very clearly a real school because vulnerable children and children of critical workers should be in school. So, and that is quite, you've only got one staff cohort and that cohort might be affected by COVID itself. So that's really very stressful. And one of my role, because remembering that I'm the DCS of children's social care and of education services, we need to make sure that we're putting in a lot of support into head teachers, into teachers generally, but also social workers being aware of that. So I think basically, that's sort of how we're working through COVID at the moment. Lots of communication, lots of support to staff where we can. I can't stand in front of social workers at the moment and do my jokes, as some of you will know that I do. But I have a WebEx, for example, every Tuesday morning now, and I've had slightly blowing my own trumpet here, up to about 160 people on that WebEx, so, and just sharing information. But also, our primary aim is to keep children safe. We also get information from public health, so it's good to work with colleagues in a different area of the council, and we can marry that up. And actually, also, we've had information from CAMS about, which has helped us look at how we might risk assess the children that we are working with. So that was a quick gamble, really, through what we're doing in terms of working through COVID, working as hard as we can, but also improving through COVID, because we need to keep improving. One of the things that Ofsted will look at, which shouldn't be the primary aim, and of course it's not, but is how we're working with children better through COVID, and how we're improving our practice. So if it's I would, Chair, like to come every time we have these meetings and give you a brief update. It will be different, and maybe it'll be an update rather than, on what I've just told you, rather than giving you the whole gamut. But certainly it's something that I would like then to be able to report to the improvement board, that I'm keeping members also updated in terms of what we're doing. So I do hope that was helpful.
Brilliant. I think if your presence here, if it isn't, we're not doing it right. So, so yeah, we need you here every time. Councillor Udin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, I think that was absolutely brilliant. No problem at all. I'd just like to make a bit of a comment on that. Yeah, I think when we are looking, obviously, at the vulnerable children, sometimes, obviously, to what I hear or what I see, through my experience, sometimes foster care and the school obviously negotiate and they deal with it, whether the child going to school or staying at home and they're doing the home in school, all these things. But I think in that case, if they have a situation like that, they need to get involved with the social worker, and the supervisor social worker, which is the responsible for the foster carer. Social worker is the child social worker. Then the IRO, often they miss IRO, the independent living officer. I think they play quite active and quite significant, important role in children's lives, obviously. So they need to know. And foster care, obviously, they need to be in control, more or less. If they say, no, the child is doing everything okay at home, we are supporting, and they don't need to go to school or they don't want to go to school, that's fine. So everybody needs to know that. So they could assess, they could look at the all situation. Do not
if they're learning, yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. If their learning needs can be best supported at home. That's absolutely right. And we have to remember that children and foster carers are, and IROs, etc., we're all different. But it should be looked at a case-by-case basis. I think there's a difference between doesn't need to and doesn't want to, And you could also, I also get concerned, particularly as I've said about children on child protection plans, because it could be a way of hiding things. Now, I'm not saying it is, but I just worry that, why can't we get into that household? Why isn't the child going to school? Particularly, that's my worries for children on child protection plans. But you're right, we should be looking at it. And of course, some carers are clinically vulnerable themselves as well. So we have to look at that. And if we go back to Jenny's presentation, she said that, some of the non-availability has been around COVID. That's good. That was seamless, wasn't it? That all fitted together there. So, but yeah, absolutely. But as I say, don't need to and don't want to are probably slightly different.
Yeah. Obviously, that need to look at,
Yeah, of course.
Everybody involved with the child,
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. Yeah.
That was a great point, Councillor Loden.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions for Sue? No, brilliant. Right, so I will say, bragging about chairing a meeting with 160 people, if none of them were elected members, it doesn't count.
Councillor Garvey, Councillor High has been to a briefing. Councillor Garvey, if you would like also to come to a briefing, you are very welcome to do so.
Brilliant. Yes, please. Yes, wouldn't mind an invitation. Thank you. Right then.
I had the best joke as well, didn't I, Sue? I brought the best joke forward.
I always do a joke at the end, Councillor Garvey. So you will be required to come with a joke.
Usually it's me. Right.
That's a comment that I didn't need to hear, but you will need to, you always have to do a joke at the end. Councillor High's joke was adequate, basically.
Is that an offset opinion?
That's
it's
my
usually
opinion.
It's usually the case, Chair.
Excellent. Right then, if that's all the questions for Sue, we'll move on with the agenda, which is item agenda number 8. Before I give you the date of the next meeting, I'd like to thank Sue for the information she's provided today, Jenny Rowan for the fostering presentation, and Bill Robinson for covering the corporate parenting strategy. For all the members who've attended today and the members of the public who are watching, and I've been told there's going to be a few members of the public watching, and I hope what they've seen brings them hope as well as comfort. So the next meeting is Monday the 15th of February at 4 p.m. And if my agenda is correct, because I've got 3 of them, I'll make that many notes. No, I've skipped. I've skipped. Councillor Cook, go on before we pull out my obvious error.
I was just going to say, can I raise something in any other business?
You certainly can. I'll just give the overview and scrutiny update, and then we'll bring you back in if that's all right. So the overview and scrutiny update. The chief on the 18th of December 2020, chief executive gave a COVID-19 update. The executive for adult health answered. Sorry, the date's wrong there. The date's incorrect. It was. I think it was a couple of days ago.
Last Thursday, Chair.
It was last Thursday. Yes, the date's incorrect. I'm not clever. The member for adult health answered questions on her portfolio. The director of adult social care and health integration updated members on the board's annual report and strategic business plan. What I will say is, obviously, the chair's update on overview and scrutiny board is from days when we were meeting in an office, and now all OSB meetings are online and there to view. So please feel free to go and view it for an in-depth look at what took place there. Any other business? Councillor Cook, can I bring you in?
So it's not often that I'm able to predict the future, but a few meetings ago, I think it might have been last meeting actually, I suggested that we should attend planning or be invited to planning when relevant decisions related to children's services were being made. I do sort of wish that we'd followed that up, because there was one recently which hit the Gazette, And I do also sort of wonder if we should be trying to seek training for counsellors who may not understand or have outdated views, is my polite version.
Well, I was obviously I'm a member of planning, and as chair of this committee and the current topic, I did bring some let's say some balance to the comments made. So I did make sure that this committee was heard in that planning. It was a good point made by yourself in that meeting, and it was said that there was no evidence of it happening in the past, and lo and behold, a meeting later. But yeah, I did make sure that our views from this panel were made clear. Councillor Dodds, before I move on.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also a member of the Planning Committee, Chris, and I did say a lot about these private homes that people are buying up a house, business people, and my concern is the quality of the safety and the way that these children are looked after. And of course, when I bring this up at any planning meeting regarding houses for children's homes, I'm told it's not a planning issue. Children, you know, the planning is the house, if that's okay. But I think we need to do something, and these things need to be changed. I don't want to see people coming into Middlesbrough that live in Northampton, are registered in London, opening up a home to put children in. I think we need to know who these people are and what the quality of care is going to be. I know they're independent businesses, but if it's in our town, I think we need to have more say. I could be wrong. Legally, I don't know, but that's my personal view. Thank you.
Chair?
Yeah, Councillor Hyde.
Hi, Chair. Sorry, I had to raise my hand, but obviously there's no view. Could I suggest that we potentially bring this item forward as an area for scrutiny then, so we can further understand the decisions that are made, the delivery that goes on into some of these homes that are sought, and to try and dispel some of the myths that might be surrounding this type of practice that goes on in Middlesbrough. I can share and say I know there's a home of this type on the road that I live in, and there's never ever been one single issue. So I think it's only fair for the members in the panel to further understand the practice that goes on in relation to this delivery. So maybe it is an item that you could potentially table for scrutiny going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, what I'll do is I think I'll have a conversation with you after this meeting of how we deliver that. And again, I'd just like to go back to Councillor Cook, who made this point a few weeks beforehand and said it could be an issue. So yeah, when he says he saw it in the future, he wasn't wrong. Right, I'm going to Councillor. I really listen. We're coming up to 2 hours, guys. We've gone through any other business. I would really like to bring this meeting to a close now. It was any other business. We've sort of taken care of it, and I know you're keen to say. Okay, then let's do this. Councillor Udin first, and then we'll bring in Councillor Lowy. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, quickly anyway. What I was going to say, I was slightly confused here. Are we talking about the children's plan, like child's plan, or is it talking about these properties, you know, where we sending children? When my colleague, Councillor Dot mentioned these places, you know, like identified, and we sending children there, but it's not like the willy-nilly we send the children though. That is maintained by the department. If we're talking about the child's plan, child need to go there. The social worker is the key, then the social worker manager, then again, child looked after, so the IRO involved. So it's not like willy-nilly we just put somewhere, but they do all sorts of, like I'm sure, so
yes.
You know,
we don't. Sorry, Councillor Udin, I interrupted you very badly there. We don't use independent residential in well, very rarely use independent residential in Middlesbrough. We've got our own homes, of course, but you're right, children can come from all over the country to these homes, but we are talking about the planning permission for them homes themselves. I do think there are things that we could be carefully looking at that maybe, you know, maybe we can talk about outside of this meeting. But yeah, it is that the children's plans should talk about the types of home that or forever home that they should have.
Yeah, and the councillor Uden on the day that it was Councillor Dean brought up the relationship with the planning application, the relationship between the firm who was going to be running it and the council. That's where the question marks were left, and that's what we need to understand. And I think that's what Councillor High has just said to we need to understand exactly what the difference was. Councillor Alawi, before we finish.
Just a point for information, I omitted earlier, sorry, to submit apologies from Councillor Higgins, who's not been very well today, and I know it's important for the minutes that we record that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alawi. I'm glad you remembered, and I'm glad it was brought up. Right, thank you very much for attending today's meeting. I think it's been a good meeting. I've already thanked everyone for coming once prematurely, but again, thank you very much. Thanks for everybody who took part and for everybody who's listened. That all that's left is to bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much, and good night, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Joe, can you stay on? Cheers, guys. Good night.
Good night. Good night, everyone.